The text message from my sister Jennifer had been urgent. Emergency family meeting. 2 p.m. Sunday. Mom's house. Everyone needs to be there. It's about your situation. My situation. I'd been wondering when this conversation would finally happen. I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home exactly at 2 o'clock, noting that all 4 family cars were already there. My brother Michael's BMW, Jennifer's Lexus SUV, Dad's Mercedes and Mom's Prius. I parked my modest Honda Civic behind them and checked my phone one more time before going inside. 3 missed calls from my assistant Victoria, 2 text messages from my CFO about quarterly projections, and an email marked urgent from my head of operations. Sunday afternoons were supposed to be quiet, but running a rapidly expanding company meant true downtime was rare. I walked through the front door without knocking, a family privilege that apparently still applied even when you were about to be ambushed. Alexandra. Mom called from the living room. We're in here, sweetheart. The scene that greeted me was carefully orchestrated. Mom and Dad sat together on the main couch, their expressions serious but loving. Jennifer occupied the armchair, a notebook and several printed papers in her lap. Michael stood near the fireplace, his posture screaming, "This was my idea." "Have a seat, honey," Dad said, gesturing to the empty chair they'd positioned directly across from everyone else. "We need to talk." I remained standing. "About what?" Michael cleared his throat. "Alex, we're worried about you. Really worried." "We all are," Jennifer added, consulting her notebook. "We've been discussing your situation for weeks and we think it's time for some tough love." My situation again. I was starting to understand why this felt like an intervention. "What situation is that?" I asked calmly. Dad leaned forward. "Sweetheart, you're 32 years old. You've been unemployed for almost 2 years now. We've tried to be patient, tried to give you space to figure things out, but it's time to face reality," Michael finished. "The freelance thing isn't working. You can barely afford that tiny apartment. You're driving a car that's 8 years old. You never go anywhere or do anything that costs money." I nodded slowly. "I see." Mom's expression was pained. "Honey, we love you. But we're scared that you're giving up on yourself. You're so smart, so capable. You graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern. You had that great job at Morrison & Associates right out of college. And then you quit," Jennifer said, reading from her notes. No explanation, no backup plan. Just quit. That had been 3 years ago. I'd been a junior analyst at Morrison & Associates, a mid-tier consulting firm, making $68,000 a year and working 70-hour weeks on projects that felt meaningless. When I'd given my notice, I told my family I wanted to try something entrepreneurial. What I hadn't told them was that I'd already been working on that something for 18 months. "We think it's time for you to consider going back to a real job," Dad continued. "Something stable with benefits and a steady paycheck. Michael has some connections at his firm." Michael nodded eagerly. "I could probably get you an interview for an entry-level position. It wouldn't be glamorous, but it would be a start. You could work your way back up." "Entry-level," I repeated. "Well, yes. You've been out of the traditional workforce for 2 years. You'd need to prove yourself again. But I think you could do it." Jennifer consulted her notes again. "We've also researched some government assistance programs. There are job training initiatives, career counseling services, even some financial aid programs for people in transition." I had to admire their thoroughness. They'd clearly put a lot of thought into this intervention. "The important thing," Mom said gently, "is that you're not alone in this. We're here to help you get back on your feet." "This is an intervention about your joblessness," Dad declared, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he'd used when we were children. "We've enabled your avoidance long enough. It's time for tough love." Mom nodded sadly at the table. "We should have done this months ago. We thought if we gave you space you'd figure it out on your own." I looked around the room at my family, people who loved me, who were genuinely concerned about my welfare, who had spent weeks planning this intervention to save me from what they perceived as failure. The irony was almost too perfect. "I appreciate your concern," I began, "but I think there might be some misunderstanding about my situation." Michael shook his head. "Alex, there's no misunderstanding. You're unemployed. You have been for 2 years. That's not sustainable." "Actually," I said, "I haven't been unemployed. I've been running my own company." The room fell silent for a moment. Then Jennifer laughed. Sweetie, selling a few freelance projects here and there isn't the same as running a company. We know you've been trying to make that work, but... Suddenly my assistant entered through the front door, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Victoria Chen had a key to my parents' house because she'd been here several times to drop off documents when I was visiting. Ms. Carter, the board meeting is ready, she called out as she walked into the living room. The investors are already connected to the video conference, and the Goldman Sachs representatives just confirmed their attendance. The room went silent when she added, "Should I tell them you'll need another few minutes to wrap up here, or would you prefer to reschedule the $40 million acquisition discussion?" Victoria stopped short when she noticed the family gathering, her professional composure faltering for just a moment. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize you were in a meeting. I can wait in the car." Four pairs of eyes stared at her, then at me, then back at her. $40 million? Dad's voice was barely a whisper. Victoria looked confused, glancing between me and my family. "Should I not have mentioned that? I thought your family knew about Carter Industries." "Carter Industries?" Jennifer repeated slowly. I sighed. "Victoria, this is my family. Everyone, this is Victoria Chen, my executive assistant and head of strategic operations." Victoria's confusion deepened. "Your family doesn't know about the company?" "We're just learning about it now," Mom said faintly. Victoria looked at me with an expression that clearly said, "How is this possible? Should I postpone the board meeting?" "No," I said. "Give me 10 minutes to explain things here, then I'll join the call." "Understood. I'll be in the kitchen making some calls." Victoria headed toward the back of the house, her phone already in her hand. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael found his voice first. "Alex, what the hell is Carter Industries?" I pulled out my phone and opened the company website, handing it to him. "It's my business. I founded it 2.5 years ago." Michael stared at the screen, his face going pale. This says Carter Industries is a technology consulting firm specializing in AI-driven business optimization." "That's correct. And it says you're the CEO and founder." "Also correct." Jennifer leaned over to read the screen. "How many employees do you have?" 47 full-time employees, plus about 20 regular contractors." Dad took the phone and scrolled through the website. "Your headquarters are in the Morrison Building downtown. That's a $20 million building. We lease 3 floors, I clarified. Though we're considering purchasing our own building next year." Mom was staring at me like I'd just announced I was an alien. "Sweetheart, I don't understand. If you own a company with 47 employees, why do you live in that small apartment? Why do you drive an old car?" It was a fair question. "Because I reinvest most of my income back into the business. Rapid growth requires capital. And I like my apartment. It's close to the office, and I don't need much space since I travel frequently for client meetings." "How frequently?" Jennifer asked. 2 or 3 times per month. Last month I was in San Francisco, Chicago, and Atlanta. Next week I'm flying to Seattle and Denver." Michael was still scrolling through the website. "This says Carter Industries has worked with Fortune 500 companies. Microsoft, Amazon, General Electric. We specialize in helping large corporations optimize their operations using artificial intelligence and machine learning," I explained. "It's a growing market." Victoria appeared in the doorway. "Miss Carter? The Goldman Sachs team is asking if we could start the acquisition discussion now. They have a hard stop at 4 o'clock." I looked at my family, all of whom were staring at me with varying expressions of shock and confusion. "What acquisition?" Dad asked weakly. "We're purchasing a smaller AI company in Austin," I said. "It'll expand our capabilities in predictive analytics. The total deal is about $42 million. Jennifer made a choking sound. $42 million? "It's a strategic investment," I explained. "The company has proprietary technology that complements our existing services, plus 23 talented employees who will join our team." Victoria checked her watch. "Miss Carter, I really do need to know about the timing." "Give me 5 more minutes," I told her. "Then we'll start the call." She nodded and disappeared again. Michael was now reading what appeared to be the company's client testimonials. "Alex, this testimonial is from the CEO of Morrison & Associates. It says Carter Industries helped them increase efficiency by 37% and saved them $2.8 million annually. That was one of our first major contracts, I said. Ironic, considering I used to work there. You consulted for your old company? Mom asked. I solved the problems I'd identified when I worked there but couldn't address as a junior analyst, I explained. Turns out they were willing to pay quite a bit for those solutions. Dad was reading more of the website. This says Carter Industries generated $18 million in revenue last year. $22 million, I corrected. The website needs to be updated with this year's numbers. $22 million in revenue, Dad repeated slowly. How much of that was profit? About 38%. We're still in growth mode, so we reinvest heavily, but yes, it's profitable. Jennifer was doing math in her head. 38% of $22 million. That's over $8 million in profit. $8.3 million, I said. Though again, most of that goes back into expansion. How much do you pay yourself? Michael asked. I hesitated. This was the question I'd been dreading. My base salary is $400,000. Plus equity, of course. The room fell silent again. $400,000, Mom said slowly. Per year. Plus benefits and equity compensation, I added. The equity is potentially worth much more if we decide to sell or go public. Victoria reappeared, looking apologetic but firm. Miss Carter, I really can't delay this any longer. The acquisition team is getting restless and Goldman Sachs has made it clear they won't reschedule. I looked at my family one more time. I need to take this meeting. It's been 2 months of negotiations and we're finally ready to close the deal. How long will it take? Dad asked. Probably an hour. Maybe 90 minutes if the final terms get complicated. Jennifer stood up suddenly. We'll wait. We're going to wait right here until you're done, and then we're going to have a very different conversation than the one we planned. I nodded. That's fair. Victoria, let's use Dad's office upstairs. The Wi-Fi is stronger up there. As I followed Victoria upstairs, I heard Michael say to the others, Did our sister just say she's about to close a $40 million deal in Dad's den? The acquisition call went smoothly. 3 months of due diligence had identified all the major issues, and both sides were motivated to close quickly. By 4:15, Carter Industries officially owned Austin-based Predictive Solutions LLC, gaining access to their proprietary algorithms and 23 talented employees. When I came back downstairs, my family was exactly where I'd left them, though they appeared to have been talking intensively while I was gone. How did it go? Mom asked. We finalized the acquisition, I said. Predictive Solutions is now part of Carter Industries. Their team will start transitioning to our systems next week. Dad leaned forward. Alex, I think we owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually. You don't need to apologize for being concerned about me, I said, sitting down across from them again. I understand why you thought I was struggling. But why didn't you tell us? Jennifer asked. Why let us think you were unemployed and barely getting by? It was a question I'd been asking myself for months. Honestly, because every time I tried to talk about my work, you'd interrupt with advice or suggestions that made it clear you didn't take it seriously. Michael winced. Like when I offered to get you an entry-level job at my firm. Or when I sent you those job listings for administrative positions, Jennifer added quietly. Or when we suggested you move back home to save money, Mom said. I nodded. It became easier to just let you think what you wanted to think. I didn't want to have to defend my choices or explain why I wasn't following a traditional career path. Dad was reading something on his phone. I just looked up Carter Industries online. You've been featured in Business Weekly, Forbes, and the Wall Street Journal. The Forbes article was particularly flattering, I said. They called us one of the most promising AI companies under 5 years old. When was that article published? Mom asked. 6 months ago. Jennifer looked stricken. 6 months ago, I was still sending you job listings for receptionist positions. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Victoria appeared in the doorway again. Miss Carter, I'm heading back to the office to start the integration paperwork. Do you need anything else today? Actually, Victoria, could you join us for a minute? I think my family has some questions about the company. She sat down on the edge of the couch, still looking slightly confused by the whole situation. Victoria, Dad said, Can you tell us what it's like working for Alexandra's company? Victoria's professional demeanor kicked in immediately. Carter Industries is the most innovative and exciting place I've ever worked. Ms. Carter has created a company culture that values creativity, problem-solving and employee development. We're growing rapidly but sustainably, and we're working on projects that are genuinely changing how businesses operate. How long have you been working there? Jennifer asked. 2 years. I started as a junior analyst and was promoted to executive assistant and head of strategic operations last year. Ms. Carter believes in promoting from within and giving people opportunities to grow. Michael looked at me. You promoted your assistant to head of strategic operations? Victoria earned that promotion, I said. She has an MBA from Wharton and was overqualified for the assistant role when I hired her. But she wanted to learn the business from the ground up. Victoria smiled. Best decision I ever made. I've learned more in 2 years at Carter Industries than I did in my previous 5 years of work experience combined. What does the company actually do? Mom asked. I mean, in terms I can understand? Victoria glanced at me and I nodded for her to explain. We help large companies use artificial intelligence to solve complex problems, Victoria said. For example, we might help a manufacturing company predict when their equipment will need maintenance, which saves them money and prevents breakdowns. Or we might help a retail company optimize their supply chain so they have the right products in the right stores at the right times. And companies pay millions of dollars for this? Dad asked. They do when it saves them tens of millions of dollars, I said. Our average client sees a return on investment of about 400% within the first year. Victoria checked her phone. Ms. Carter, I should mention that the Seattle client moved our meeting to tomorrow morning instead of Tuesday. So you'll need to fly out tonight instead of Monday. Tonight. I looked at my watch. It was almost 5 o'clock. The flight leaves at 8:30. I can have a car pick you up at 7. I looked at my family who were still processing everything they'd learned in the past 2 hours. Actually, I said, could you book me on the morning flight instead? I think my family and I have more to discuss. Victoria nodded. Of course. I'll rearrange the Seattle schedule and send you the updated itinerary. After she left, the room fell quiet again. Jennifer was the first to speak. Alex, I feel like we don't know you at all. You know me, I said. You just didn't know about my work. But your work is such a huge part of who you are, Mom protested. You've built this incredible company, you're helping other businesses solve problems, you're employing almost 50 people. How could we not know about any of that? It was a fair question and one that cut to the heart of our family dynamics. Because every time I tried to share something about my work, you'd either change the subject or offer advice that made it clear you didn't understand what I was doing, I said honestly. It was easier to talk about other things. Michael looked uncomfortable. Can you give us an example? I thought back to family dinners over the past 2 years. Last Christmas, when you asked what I was working on, I said I was developing AI solutions for supply chain optimization. Jennifer immediately suggested I look into getting a job at Target because they probably need people who understand supply chains. Jennifer winced. I remember that. I thought I was being helpful. Or when I mentioned I was traveling to meet with potential clients, Dad suggested I look into becoming a travel agent because I seemed to enjoy planning trips. Dad looked stricken. I thought you were just trying to make your unemployment sound more impressive than it was. That's exactly the problem, I said. You'd already decided I was unemployed and struggling, so you interpreted everything I said through that lens. Mom leaned forward. Sweetheart, how can we do better? How can we understand and support what you're actually doing? I thought about that. Start by asking questions instead of making assumptions. When I tell you about a project or a client, ask me to explain what makes it interesting or challenging. When I mention traveling for work, ask about the cities I'm visiting or the people I'm meeting. And stop offering advice about finding a real job, I added with a smile. Michael laughed, but it was rueful. Yeah, I think we can stop doing that. Victoria's voice came from the kitchen. Miss Carter, I have the revised travel itinerary ready whenever you'd like to review it. Bring it in here, I called back. She returned with her tablet and began reading. Tomorrow's flight to Seattle leaves at 6:40 a.m., arriving at 8:20 local time. Meeting with Cascade Industries at 10 a.m., site visit at 2 p.m., dinner with their executive team at 7 p.m. Wednesday morning flight to Denver, meeting with Mountain Peak Manufacturing at 11 a.m. As Victoria read through my schedule, I watched my family's expressions change. They were beginning to understand the scope and scale of what I did every day. "How many clients do you have?" Dad asked when Victoria finished. 17 active clients, Victoria answered. Plus we're in negotiations with 6 potential new clients. "And how much does a typical project cost?" Jennifer asked. I considered how to answer that. It varies widely depending on the scope and complexity. Our smallest project last year was about $200,000. Our largest was $3.8 million. Million, Mom repeated faintly. The $3.8 million project was for a pharmaceutical company, I explained. We developed an AI system that reduced their drug development timeline by 18 months and saved them an estimated $40 million in research costs. Michael was shaking his head slowly. "Alex, you're not just successful. You're incredibly successful. Like more successful than any of us." It was true, though I'd never thought about it in comparison terms. Michael made good money as a senior accountant. Jennifer was a successful real estate agent. But neither of them was operating at the scale of Carter Industries. "Success isn't a competition," I said. "We're all doing work that matters to us." "But you're making more money in a year than I'll probably make in a decade," Jennifer said. "And you're doing it by solving problems and creating jobs and helping other businesses succeed. That's incredible." Victoria stood up. "I should head back to the office. Miss Carter, do you need anything else before tomorrow's trip?" "Actually, Victoria, before you go, could you tell my family about our company culture initiatives? I think they'd be interested." Victoria's face lit up. "Oh, definitely. Ms. Carter has created one of the most employee-friendly work environments I've ever seen. We have unlimited PTO, comprehensive health coverage, a profit-sharing program, professional development budgets for every employee, and flexible work arrangements. Plus the annual company retreat," I added. "Right. Last year we went to Costa Rica for a week. The entire company, all expenses paid. This year we're planning something in Europe." Mom looked amazed. "You take your entire company on vacation?" "It's part team building, part professional development, part thank you for their hard work," I explained. "Good employees are the foundation of any successful business." After Victoria left, my family and I spent another hour talking about Carter Industries, my work, and my plans for the future. It was the most honest conversation we'd had about my career in 3 years. "I have one more question," Dad said as evening was settling in. "Why Carter Industries? Why not Alexandra Industries or Stevens Industries?" Stevens was our family name. I smiled. Carter was Mom's maiden name. I wanted to honor that side of the family too. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "You named your company after my family?" "Your grandfather was an entrepreneur," I said. "He started that small manufacturing business that supported 3 generations of your family. I always admired that story about building something lasting." "He would have been so proud," Mom whispered. As I prepared to leave for home that evening, Jennifer pulled me aside. "Alex, I owe you a huge apology. Not just for today but for the past 2 years. I've been treating you like you were failing when you were actually succeeding beyond any of our wildest dreams." "You were trying to help," I said. "I understand that. But I wasn't really listening to you," she continued. "I had this image in my head of who you were supposed to be, and I wasn't paying attention to who you actually are." Michael joined us. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier about us interrupting you with advice. I think we've been doing that our whole lives, haven't we?" It was true, though I'd never articulated it quite that way. As the youngest child, I'd grown up with 2 older siblings who often assumed they knew what was best for me. "Maybe," I said. "But we can change that pattern." "How?" Jennifer asked. "By having conversations instead of interventions," I said. "By asking questions instead of making assumptions. By celebrating each other's successes instead of trying to fix each other's perceived failures." Dad appeared with Mom. "Alexandra, your mother and I want you to know how proud we are of what you've accomplished. And how sorry we are that we didn't know about it sooner. We'd like to learn more," Mom added. "About your company, your work, your plans. Would you be willing to have dinner with us next week and really tell us about your business?" "I'd love that," I said honestly. "And maybe Jennifer said hesitantly. Maybe you could show us your office sometime? I'd love to see where all this innovation happens. I smiled. I think that can be arranged. As I drove home that night, I thought about the afternoon's events. My family had called an intervention to save me from unemployment and failure. Instead, they discovered I was running a multi-million-dollar company and employing almost 50 people. But more importantly, we'd finally started having the conversations we should have been having all along. Sometimes the biggest obstacles to understanding aren't what people don't know about you, they're what people think they already know. And sometimes the best interventions are the ones that force everyone to admit they might have been wrong about everything. 3 days later, I gave my family a tour of Carter Industries headquarters. Mom cried when she saw the conference room named the Carter Room in honor of her father. Dad spent an hour talking to our head of engineering about artificial intelligence applications. Jennifer asked thoughtful questions about our business development strategies, and Michael was genuinely interested in our financial operations. For the first time in years, I felt like my family actually knew who I was and what I'd built. And for the first time ever, Sunday dinner conversations started including questions about quarterly projections, client acquisitions, and expansion plans, alongside the usual family news and gossip. It turned out that once my family understood what I actually did for work, they had plenty of intelligent questions and insights to offer. They just needed to know what they were talking about first.